you said there's the possibility that the U.S. government might just move away completely from Bitcoin. But on the other hand, we're saying that Bitcoin succeeds by serving the individual. In a world where the U.S. government completely moves away from Bitcoin, bans it, whatever, it sounds like a United States that's not serving the individual at all. Is that a different world than what we live in?
Really, the idea that I wanted to convey was that for the United States to move to a sound money standard, that I think that it's not a given that they will take custody of Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that it's a requirement.
Yeah.
I mean, for all we know, they could use a proprietary blockchain digital asset to handle their accounting systems internally. And provide the transparency that we need. On the other hand, let's say we're paying our taxes in Bitcoin and we get to watch the money move through the system. That is something that's fascinating. And you could do it today, right? You could have an accounting system that you flag your tax payment and you get to watch it move into the sidewalk down the street.
And see how it's distributed. That would be crazy. Boy, that would be
the ultimate public sector transparency.
That.
Well, when you move back to a sound money standard, voting, I think people would be more confident that their vote actually matters.
Right.
And if you're moving things back to the state and local governments, tax collection and public sector spending is much closer to the individual.
Right.
Not saying that California local government would want to do this as it is today.
Sure.
Maybe they will in 20 years. Maybe it flips. Who knows?
Yeah.
But you could absolutely have a city of the future that's perfectly transparent. And that would be super attractive to a lot of people.
That's the ideal, right? I mean, if it's a big if, right? And open to debate between anarcho-capitalists, libertarians, minarchists, whoever. If government is this kind of necessary evil, the ideal state would be one that is fully transparent. You could trace tax dollars from source to activity project.
Absolutely.
And that's not something that was even imaginable really prior to, well, definitely not prior to the internet, probably not prior to Bitcoin. Do you buy into this idea that there's going to be a lot of upheaval in this transition? Because I mean, it sounds, well, we are moving from a centralizing government dynamic where we're printing money and the federal government's getting stronger and local government's getting weaker. Bitcoin inverts that entire process. So do you think there's going to be kind of a cataclysmic reversal, or is this a smooth transition? What do you subscribe to in terms of how Bitcoin plays out?
I think any guess would be wrong. Once again, the fact that Bitcoin exists does create a blow-off valve. And I think that's something that we know today and something that we can be super thankful for.
What does that mean when you say blow-off valve? What does that mean specifically?
It creates a place for people to store value that is not in a government institution. And people are going to need that if they're going to navigate any type of default or entitlement reform or debt reform. I think a worst case scenario would be for, a mandibles situation, right? Where we just slough off the debt. People are really, really angry and perhaps maybe angry enough to attack us. Yeah.
So a place to keep your wealth or purchasing power that's immune to redistribution schemes that inevitably come in the wake of all these
That's right.
things,
Yeah.
default, et cetera.
As people try to break glass in case of emergency, and let's say you've got an authoritarian that's breaking that glass, they're going to be grabbing for all kinds of wild things that are not constitutional.
Yeah.
And fast forward 10 years, let's say you've got 20 people in the Supreme Court and it's just a bunch of super legislators and you've got a worst case situation. Yeah, it's going to be extremely helpful for us to create a situation for when that authoritarian goes to grasp, that there's nothing there to grasp.
Yeah.
The lifeline does not exist. And they just have to stop.
Yeah.
They don't have the money to do what their heart desires. And there's an authoritarian in all of us.
Of course, yeah. It's the ego writ large, right? Yeah. And that's such an interesting point, that because that authoritarian can act beyond the Constitution, as you said, right? They're not unconstitutional things they will be grabbing for.
They're going to try.
Right. And oftentimes, well, desperate times call for desperate measures. Oftentimes, these things do get approved and enacted, i.e., the pandemic we just went through, right? There was a lot of unconstitutional things happening for the past 4 years, I guess at this point. But Bitcoin's interesting because you can't, even if the authoritarian, obviously he would want to, but they're not able to actually, I guess, go beyond the constitution of Bitcoin, if you will, right? What's written inside of Bitcoin is what you can't circumvent it. Let's put it that way. Does that, I've said this a bunch of times, I just wonder what your thoughts are. In terms of being American in spirit, how would you compare the U.S. Constitution to Bitcoin?
Oh, I absolutely think they're in harmony. 100%. Yeah. Especially if you think about the decentralization element and the Second Amendment. Those two things have a ton in common. So have you ever heard of the phrase or the idea of something called a ghost threat?
No.
A ghost threat. A threat that lives rent-free inside the head of an authoritarian, where they know that if they violate whatever rule that it is, something bad's going to happen. And that's what the Second Amendment is. It's a ghost threat.
Got it. So it's the
Bitcoin's the same thing. What are you going to do? Come get my Bitcoin? You can't. You're going to cut my head off? Throw me in jail? Yeah. You can't get it. And it creates a situation where the needs to fuel the authoritarian just isn't there. It gives people that are making wise decisions an opportunity to actually convey their idea and get it through.
Yeah, so starving the beast, obviously, of, well, money printing, frankly.
Stealing
through money printing, which at least forces the beast to raise money through explicit taxation, which people are then, it's more visible, it's more legible. People can see, right? Oh, I'm paying this tax bill, I'm writing this check, if you will, to Uncle Sam or whatever the government agency is for these activities, right? So the relationship becomes much more explicit, less surreptitious. So now there's more transparency, more visibility on the government agency. And then I guess the Second Amendment piece is like, there's a symmetry of power, right? If citizens have the right to bear arms, that's really meant so the government can't have an asymmetric physical power projection capability over citizens.
That's right. And the fact that those arms are so decentralized creates a situation where if the government did want to come and take them all up, the administrative burden of enforcing that law is just not feasible. And then you get back to the economics, the cost of enforcing that law. Okay, where are you going to get the money? If they've got unlimited money, yeah, maybe that does happen. Right? Maybe they can wage a 100-year war on the right to defend yourself. But if they don't have the money, they can't do it. They actually have to stop and think about what their priority is and make a wise decision, or you're out.
Yeah, then Bitcoin's attacking it at two sides, right? Because they would need to print money to wage that war on the right to defend yourself. So if they did wage that war, well, then the value of Bitcoin would go up because they're printing the money and they're increasing, which increases demand for people to hold Bitcoin just by printing the money. But then you're also waging this war on the right to self-custody or the right to defend yourself, which is also going to increase demand for Bitcoin. So that's very fascinating. Yeah, and it really does come down to the symmetry or asymmetry of power dynamics, right? It's like that phrase, power to the people, this ideal is like, well, we want symmetry among, or equality in the eyes of the law, right? We want symmetry among people in the eyes of power. And Bitcoin is something that actually enables that ideal that we've talked about for many years and worked towards, but now Bitcoin is like a giant leap forward in that respect.
Now you see why it captured my interest.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.